I would invite you to sit back in your chairs even a little bit more, feeling your feet on the ground. Let us take a holy breath in together, breathing in and out. God, we ask that the words move through all of us now. Touch us. Touch us in the ways we need to be touched in this moment and in the days ahead. May the peace within us only grow. May our hearts only deepen in the understanding that your love is the very presence, unending and infinite. And so it is. Amen. So how many of you happen to know what the white sign, if you are coming over the bridge from Boston, the Sagamore, not the Bourne, the white sign that's been recently repainted on the right-hand side right before the bridge says? Does anybody know? Put your hand up. The Samaritans. And does anybody know what it says under Samaritans? Desperate. Actually, they changed it. And I just noticed it today. And it's incredibly powerful because it speaks right to the message that I bring you. Now the line says, very simply, desperate, ? We listen, period. Desperate, we listen. The deepest and healing balm that any of us seek is to be heard and understood. So obviously the Samaritans understand that as well. The power of listening, the power of holy listening, the capacity that we each have to bring full presence to one another is so needed at this moment in time. As we sang just now, a child shivers in the cold, I had to turn off NPR that I listened to on the way here, driving from Boston, when the story about the child in detention who passed away with very little attention was too much for my heart to handle in that moment. New video has surfaced. If you've heard this story, the video of a child in an immigrant detention camp who, without proper medical attention, while being videoed, so to speak, passed simply away from this realm. And so I keep that present as I'm singing a child, and it's hard for me to even contain the tears that we weep for the child in the manger and for the child who left the manger, had a challenging life, and has now left this particular realm. To be at peace, yes. So I bring not a political message. What I bring is a message today to herald all of us to wake up just a little bit more, to listen to one another and to what's going on in the world. My belief is that there is actually a holy trinity of listening that I've come to understand. 3 different pieces. They each begin with an S. It's a very simple mnemonic. Self, incredibly important, listening to ourselves. Soul is listening to what we might call God, the presence, some sense of the sacred. And then the third one is listening to society. So self, soul, society. All 3 of these kinds of listening, especially now, are essential. Not maybe, not sometimes, not when we've had our coffee or our Adderall or whatever we might be having, but in every moment, doing what we need to do to be fully present, to listen to ourselves, to listen to whatever that calling is that tells us how to show up today and how to treat one another. I usually listen to music on the way down as well. I have about an hour and 30-minute ride. And today I found that the music just wasn't fitting. It was some of the music we were going to perform for you today, and we were going to sing together. Then I listened to some other holiday tunes, and that wasn't quite doing it. What I mean is, I wasn't able to hear what I was supposed to deliver. Now, you may not have gotten up this morning knowing that you were coming to a setting where you were going to give a talk all on your own on the big stage, but you will give many talks today. You will deliver multiple messages to the people who are important to you, to your own self. And what I've come to understand is if we don't get very clear about all three of those components and hone in and tweak them with great attention, then a lot of noise is able to penetrate our sacred center. And the impact of that is we are much less available to one another and to what I believe is a sacred calling that each and every one of us possess. And so I turned off the radio. Sounds like I have an AM, FM, 1960 jalopy. I turned off the radio. I turned off the stereo. And all I could hear was the car and a couple of phone prompts. And in that silence, I suddenly thought of the triad that I just shared. There's no magical capacity that I have for listening. I have some developed capacities in the realm of communication. I'm an extrovert. I know how to articulate words, and I've been on stage a lot. Other than that, I do nothing differently or different than any of you. When I'm able to listen, when I'm able to actually hear what's coming through, then I'm able to deliver that. And that's incredibly important. It was important moving through the portal of all three of them, self, soul, and society, at my Thanksgiving table. I thought we would escape all drama this year. How many of you escaped all drama at your Thanksgiving table? Brilliant. There are some hands. Terrific. You might be lying, but in love I say that. You caused the drama, so your hand went up. Brilliant. At my Thanksgiving table, and I don't know about yours, the people sitting at that table come from different places politically, energetically, religiously, spiritually. And so we're quite cowed. We're quite silent with one another these days, which is a real challenge. Another sermon someday. So we aren't offering a lot other than please pass the butter, or this wine is nice, or wow, isn't it intense that we are the generation sitting at the table and in the last 3 years all of our parents have passed. And here we sit. And in that moment when that got shared, we all thought, I believe I picked up from others, I know I thought, well then let's take this a little more seriously, let's crank this up, let's try to connect. And in that space, my 18-year-old niece must have heard that energetically, and she offered a thought or two, really a question, in naive innocence, about my husband's heritage. Edwin is Puerto Rican, and so she was offering some thoughts about Puerto Rico, and she offered a couple of thoughts about its location. She was a little off in terms of geographically. And we had a couple of moments that really were those danger moments at the Thanksgiving table, when, especially if there are sober people who aren't completely, the sober ones are thinking, somebody do something. So we had a beat, and I actually spoke, and I maintain, for better or for worse, really sort of a ministerial, therapeutic presence in my family, no matter what is underneath. It's not incredibly authentic some of the time, but I've learned to play that role. We all play roles. So I played that role, and then I decided not to, and I said a few words, and that was unexpected, and there were ripples in the pond, and it was terribly uncomfortable. And actually, 2 people left the table. On the way to that dinner, I said out loud to my husband, I will not offer anything judgmental, no matter what I feel and think. I will be the true presence of love, and I mean that authentically. And so I was incredibly frustrated that I was the one who had caused the ripple. And it wasn't until the next day that I sat down with my sister and had what I might call a holy conversation. This is what I was thinking. What were you thinking? Do we now understand each other? No. Oh, this is what I was thinking. This is what I was thinking. Okay, are we clearer? No. And the presence of God that I offer you inside of a true holy conversation, where both parties are trying to hear differently, is that the presence of God can then drop in. And even if you're at it for a couple of hours, and even if there are tears and frustration and anger, and even if shame triggers are hit and both parties think in different moments that they're right, wrong, stupid, crazy, don't get it, you stick with it. You hug. You say, let's talk about this again. And then in my case, I spend 2 days wondering about the silence and the lack of return texts and phone calls. And I think this is payment for my being in my truth, which is what I teach people every day. Now, I ran up what's called, in my world, the ladder of inference, and I made all sorts of assumptions about that silence. That silence had nothing to do with me. The silence was broken with a very loving, thank you for the conversation, let's keep talking. These conversations present themselves every day to us, and again, 3 pieces of holy listening and conversation that I think are essential. That one was about the other. That one was also, though, about myself and the words I'm telling myself. I'll give you another moment. I was in a class at the gym, and my gym, unfortunately, has mirrors, and I remember standing in front of the mirror 2 days after turning 55, and I am standing in front of the mirror, and I actually, 2 weeks ago on a Thursday at about 6:20 a.m., thought some of the cruelest thoughts I've ever thought about myself. They came with such a ferocity and so intensely that I remember standing in front of the mirror thinking, who's that? Who's that? Stupid, ugly, fat. I could give you the long list. I had just finished a book by Shad Helmstetter that came out 25 years ago, which is called What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. It's a brilliant book. I highly recommend it. It is essentially about positive self-talk. I read this book. 2 days later, I'm in the gym. I'm standing looking at the mirror, and I have this conversation with myself that leaves me feeling so defeated, so deflated. So what did I do? It's what I would offer each and every one of you. When that voice speaks, that voice is actually not real. That voice is an accumulation of every judgment that you've taken on, and our work is to listen through it. So I did. I stood there. Everybody went on with the class, seriously. They know I'm a little off, so they were cool with that. And I stayed in front of the mirror for a beat or two, and I thought, but there's more. And what came next was the deepest self-compassion for just the kookiness of that conversation that I had allowed myself in a long time. So there was a moment of self-hate, anger, doubt. I'm listening into that. I'm listening. There's more, God. Oh, I'm okay. Oh, I'm really okay. Oh, I sort of rock for 55. That's God. That's not Adam. That's what I call God. That is the presence that when we listen deeper for it, it comes. Our work is about listening to one another differently. How many people have ever heard of StoryCorps? Maybe you've heard a story via StoryCorps on NPR. So StoryCorps has been around for about 25 years, started by a man named Dave Isay. And they have allowed people, created space for people to tell stories to one another, essentially to listen to one another. Does anybody know their tagline? I love their tag. It's actually the tagline I gave this talk, which is listening is an act of love. Listening is an act of love. So they've brought together thousands and thousands of people. Friends, relatives, not relatives, enemies, people on different political divides, people from different religious backgrounds. And they've created space for there to be conversations. All of those conversations are recorded, and they are then recorded in the Library of Congress. Very cool. And I had the pleasure 3 weeks ago to go to Wellesley College to see the CEO of StoryCorps, who's on the road. I will tell you, I didn't think she was the most scintillating speaker, but she wasn't there as a speaker herself. She was there sort of taking the StoryCorps story on the road during the holidays for one particular reason: to introduce people to the StoryCorps app, which lives on your phone, either Android or iPhone, available today. And that app allows you to have conversations, have them recorded, give them a structure, essentially to make them holy. And what she did was she showed 14 clips of 14 stories. And most of the people in that room, a very high academic group at Wellesley College, including the president of Wellesley and several other folks. Within 3 clips, most people in the room are weeping. And the clips were simple. They were such as, the one that really moved me was a couple from Massachusetts, a father and a daughter, who several years ago, probably I would guess around 2015, decided they stood on either side of the political aisle. And they actually stopped talking to one another, and they made assumptions about what the other thought about the other. And it was incredibly powerful because these are live. You don't see the people. It was a sweet little animation they've done now. But you hear the daughter say to the father, and she's probably 30, she says to the father, "Oh, I never talk about politics anymore because I think you think I'm an idiot." And there's a beat, and he's got the most intense and delightful, I can say this here, sort of Revere Everett accent, which I could do, but I won't do for you. But I just loved it because it was so endearing. You just wanted to hug him. I'm not going to do it, but it was so good. He said, "I love you, Emily. I love you. I frickin' love you. I have always loved you. I can't believe that's what you think. I don't know where you got that. Where did you get that misperception?" She doesn't have an accent, so I won't do her. She basically starts to cry in that moment, and she says, "Well, I just assumed that if you never talked to me, that you didn't think that what I had to offer was worth anything." And then he starts to cry, and he sounds like a really tough nut to crack. And he says, "I have always loved you. I have always respected you. We may disagree politically, but you're my daughter, and you mean everything to me." And there's a beat. And here's what happens in that beat. From my perspective, the presence of God, the sacred holy presence that is within each and every one of us, drops down, connects the two of them, surrounds them, and they're able to sit in that for a beat and recognize they've heard something different. And they've heard something different because they have listened through the difference. That is my point this morning. It is incumbent upon all of you and me and everybody else on the planet, especially those of us who profess to be spiritual, who show up somewhere in a community on a Sunday morning, to actually school ourselves in difference, to understand that right now our country is incredibly divided and the world is shaking. And it is our work, especially as students of unity and new thought, to figure out every morning what is mine to do. And I will give you a question. The question I would implore you to be asking yourself: what haven't I heard? What haven't I heard? What should I be listening for? Because the sounds of the season are beautiful and they are myriad. The sounds of the seasons will overwhelm you. Whether that's the cash register at Best Buy, whether that's you clicking on the next link to Amazon, or whether that's actually sitting quietly with your granddaughter, hearing her giggle a little bit as she watches Santa Claus is coming to town. These are all the sounds of the season. But the other sounds of the season that I think we are called to listen deeply to are those of difference. The ones that feel sharp. The ones that we immediately defend against. That's not right, that's wrong. I will tell you, my friends, that the secret of surviving the holiday season is understanding that the world is much more gray than you imagine. You all hold, as do I, very tightly to your version of reality, to what is right, to what is holy, and to what is good. And the work that I think we are called to, that we are capable of as holy beings, here to love one another even more deeply, is to take that to the next level and to listen with our whole hearts, our whole selves, to self, sort of taking in the information about myself, shifting the words that are not useful or that are mean or unkind, changing the dialogue, listening to soul, spending time however you spend time in the quiet. I meditate for a very short amount of time. These days, I've learned many different ways, and I teach meditation, and yet I find myself using the Calm app, C-A-L-M, on my phone. Love it. If you're on my Facebook page, if you're not, get on it. It's just Adam Sutton. It's actually Reverend Adam Sutton. And if you are on it, you will see that almost every day I send out the meditation. It's 9 to 11 minutes long. It's not that long. I've committed to at least that in the morning. That's when I'm able to actually hear what I'm supposed to do and say. This morning I have angel cards on my altar, and I was thinking about this service, and I went to flip one over. I'm somebody who has studied a lot. I've been to seminary. People probably make assumptions and projections about what my spiritual life looks like, but sometimes a 10-minute meditation is all I can do to create space to hear that soul coming through. And I used an angel card this morning, and I flipped it over, and it said purpose. And in that quiet, I heard a very loud voice say, your purpose is to share the love of God. And I will tell you, those words, in that sound, in that way, have never come through before. This may surprise some, it may not even make sense to you. That voice is available to you. That voice that tells you what you are here to do, what you are called to listen to and through, is available to you as well. And so I listened, I rocked a little bit, I looked back at the angel card, I flipped the angel card over, I said a prayer, and I set off to discover that my locks on my car had frozen shut, and it was 12 degrees. And my astrology's own horoscope talked all about the frustrations that will lead me to greater listening. And I texted Jack and said, I'm going to be a little bit late, but we will pull it off. And holy listening, holy conversations are available over text as well, because what Jack texted back very quickly, in my concern for all of you and in my capacity to be professional and be frustrated to show up late in any way, Jack simply wrote back, no worries. That is the voice of God. Because God said, there's no worries. There's no worries. It's all fine. You could come late, you could come not at all, they'll be okay. It's all okay. And that's what I offer you, that if you listen hard enough and clearly enough and long enough, with enough silence, you will come away with the understanding that even now, even in this moment in time, in this country and every other country on earth, it really is okay. There really are no worries when we stay connected to ourself, to our soul, and to this society. That's where true practical spirituality takes root. It comes from within and moves without, connecting all of us in that StoryCorps bubble of love, because listening is nothing but an act of love. It is what we are called to do. It's the only thing we're really here for. Listening is the act of love. So if you want to hear what I hear, go out and listen more closely in the next week of Advent to the shepherd boys and the kings. And they will tell you what to do. They will. Trust me. And so it is. Amen.
You have been watching the message from our Sunday celebration service here at Unity on Cape Cod, providing a positive path for spiritual living. Please join us every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. at 147 Walton Ave, Hyannis, Mass. And visit us online at www.unityoncapecod.org.